A child in East Africa, 70,000 years ago, presses a thorn deeper into her heel than she meant to. She does not cry out. Not yet. She sits down in the dust, pulls her foot toward her face, and studies the wound the way an animal studies a threat. Quietly, completely, without panic. Within an hour, the skin around the puncture will begin to swell. Within a day, if nothing is done, that swelling could become something else entirely. A door. An opening. The kind small enough to miss and large enough to kill. We like to imagine early humans as fragile, defenseless against a world without antibiotics, without surgeons, without a single pill. We imagine short lives cut brutally short by the first scraped knee, the first fever, the first bad meal. That image is wrong. Not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. Because the humans who survived long enough to become us were not living without medicine. They were living inside it. For most of our species' existence, the human body was not the patient. It was the pharmacy, the surgeon, and the hospital, all at once. And it had been rehearsing that role for millions of years before the first written word. Consider what a wound actually is, biologically. Not an accident. A signal. Within seconds of that thorn-breaking skin, the girl's blood vessels constrict, sealing the breach. Platelets rush to the site and lock together into a scaffold. White blood cells arrive like an emergency response unit that never sleeps, never negotiates, and has been on call since before there were eyes to see them. This entire system evolved not for her. It evolved for every ancestor before her who bled and did not die. A filtering process spanning hundreds of thousands of generations, quietly deciding, over and over, which immune responses were strong enough to keep the species alive. Every person walking the earth today is descended from an unbroken chain of survivors. Not the strongest, not the smartest. The ones whose bodies happen to fight infection just well enough, just often enough. That is not folklore. That is arithmetic, written in flesh. But the body alone was never enough. And this is where the story becomes stranger than most people expect. Most people assume early humans treated illness through trial and superstition, random plants, desperate guesses, prayers thrown at a silent sky. That is not what the evidence shows. In 2012, researchers analyzing dental plaque from a Neanderthal skeleton in Spain found something that should not have been there. Traces of poplar bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the same compound at the core of modern aspirin. The same individual showed signs of a dental abscess and an intestinal parasite. He was, it seems, self-medicating for pain, 60,000 years before the concept of a pharmacy existed. This was not an isolated case. It was a pattern. Chimpanzees swallow rough, unpalatable leaves whole, not for nutrition, but to physically scrape parasites from their intestinal walls. Elephants travel for miles to consume specific plants known to induce labor. Even insects self-medicate. Some species of ants seek out antimicrobial resin when their colony faces infection. If our closest relatives and creatures far more distant from us on the evolutionary tree engage in this behavior instinctively, then the picture shifts. Medicine is not a human invention. Medicine is older than humanity itself. We did not create it. We inherited it. And once you accept that, a deeper and more unsettling question emerges. If the instinct for healing predates our species, what exactly were early humans drawing on when instinct alone was not enough? The answer is memory, not personal memory. Collective memory, stored not in books, but in people, in small foraging bands. The elderly were not a burden to be managed. They were a database. A single elder might carry, across a lifetime, the accumulated observations of which berries stopped bleeding, which barks lowered fever, which roots induced vomiting when something poisonous had been eaten by mistake. That knowledge was not written down because it did not need to be. It was rehearsed, generation after generation, through story, through demonstration, through the simple act of a child watching a grandmother press the right leaf against the right wound at the right moment. Anthropological studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, from the Hadza of Tanzania to the Tsimane of the Bolivian Amazon, reveal something remarkable. Pharmacological knowledge bases numbering in the hundreds of distinct plant treatments, passed with a precision that mirrors formal science, tested not in laboratories, but across thousands of years of consequence. Use the wrong plant, and the lesson dies with you. Use the right one, and it survives in the mouths of your children. This was not primitive trial and error. This was an information system with mortality as its editor. But knowledge could only go so far, because the true danger early humans faced was rarely the wound itself. It was what came after. Here is the uncomfortable truth modern life has allowed us to forget. Infection is patient. It does not announce itself immediately. It waits. Hours, sometimes days, building quietly beneath the skin before the fever begins. Without antibiotics, a single untreated wound infection could, and often did, end a life. This is real. This is not a myth to be dismantled. And yet the mortality data tells a more complicated story than simple fragility. Paleopathological studies of skeletal remains, bones that carry the healed scars of broken limbs, blunt trauma, even trypan skulls where ancient people drilled openings into the cranium and lived, show survival rates for severe injury that surprised the researchers who first examined them. Healed fractures, regrown bone around old breaks. Evidence, over and over, of catastrophic injuries followed by years, sometimes decades, of continued life. How does someone survive a shattered femur with no surgeon, no cast, no morphine? The answer, uncomfortably, is other people. A broken leg in an isolated animal is often a death sentence. No mobility, no food, no protection. A broken leg in a human band was different. Someone brought water. Someone brought food. Someone kept watch through the fevered nights when the infection could have gone either way. This is the detail that changes the entire picture. Ancient survival was never a story about individual bodies triumphing over disease. It was a story about groups refusing to let individuals die alone. Care itself was the medicine. Presence itself was the treatment. And this reframes something almost every modern person misunderstands about the ancient world. We tend to picture prehistoric life as a battle between a lone human and a hostile environment. But biologically, socially, evolutionarily, humans were never built to survive alone. We are, and always have been, a species that heals in groups. There is something else here, something researchers have only begun to take seriously in the last 2 decades. The placebo effect, long dismissed as an illusion, a trick the mind plays on itself, is now understood to trigger measurable, physical changes. Real reductions in inflammation. Real releases of the body's own natural painkillers. Which means the rituals ancient humans performed around healing. The chanting, the touching, the ceremony, the sense of being witnessed and cared for in a moment of suffering, were not mere superstition layered on top of ineffective treatment. They may have been treatment. A second, invisible layer of medicine, activated not by chemistry, but by belief, by trust, by the simple, ancient certainty of not facing death alone. Consider what that means. The story does not require prehistoric people to guess correctly. It only requires them to care convincingly. But even this does not fully explain the deepest mystery. Because disease itself behaved differently 10,000 years ago than it does now. And the reason why unsettles the comfortable modern assumption that ancient life was simply dirtier, and therefore automatically more dangerous. Most infectious diseases require population density to survive. Measles needs hundreds of thousands of people in close, continuous contact to sustain itself. Smallpox spreads best in crowded settlements. Tuberculosis thrives where people breathe the same enclosed air for years. Small, mobile bands of 20, 30, 50 people, the standard unit of human life for the overwhelming majority of our species' existence, could not sustain these diseases at all. The pathogen would burn through the group and then have nowhere left to go. No new bodies. No new spread. Extinction for the disease, not the people. This is the part almost no one expects. In certain, specific ways, early human life was not more dangerous than settled civilization. It was less exposed to an entire category of catastrophic illness that simply did not exist yet, because the conditions required to create it, density, permanence, proximity to livestock, had not yet been invented. The diseases we now associate with human suffering throughout history, plague, smallpox, cholera, tuberculosis, are not ancient at all, in the deepest sense. They are recent. They are the price of settlement, the price of agriculture, the price of living, for the first time in our evolutionary history, in one place, surrounded by strangers, downwind from our own animals. Ancient humans did not conquer disease. In many cases, They simply had not yet built the world where those diseases could exist.